The first reading is the book of Genesis 12, 1 through 4. I need a reader.
I'll read it. A reading from the book of Genesis. The Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from the land of your kinsfolk and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. All the communities of the earth shall find blessing in you." Abram went as the Lord directed him. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Okay, so we're in Genesis 12 here. And so when we look at Genesis, the first part, what do we have? We have the creation, right? It starts out with creation of all things. We have man and Adam and Eve made. Then we have the fall of man happening in the beginning of Genesis. We have the corruption of the whole world. And then God ends up purging the world with the flood, right? And the only ones left were Noah and his family. Then eventually we have the Tower of Babel. We have, it seems like humanity is fracturing, and it seems like it's really not on its feet, right? God has a new plan. The old covenant, it begins with the father of faith, Abram, who eventually is going to be renamed as Abraham. But that's kind of the background at where it's at. And so God uses Abram, so he's a very important person in salvation history. And so the first thing the Lord says to Abram, "Go forth from the land of your kinsfolk, from your father's house to a land that I will show you." So he has to detach from what? His land, his family, which is, his kinfolk, kinship, and his father's house. So back at that point in time, there was no phones, there was no way of travel. I mean, there was no cars, there was no airplanes, there was no communication. When he left that was all of his security that he would ever have. They built everything around their area, they protected their area. That was their whole universe, their little mini universe, is the people in that group.
Is that the point of sending him away?
Yeah, well, that's where he does this. So that's God's electing him to go on this, and he just tells him to leave. He doesn't even tell him where you're going to go. He says, "Get up and go, and I'll show you." So that requires a lot of trust in his part, too. So in Lent, we must kind of leave behind our comfort zone. So the things that we're used to, we have to leave the comfort zone of, maybe giving up something. You could give up social media or TV or something, or food or whatever. We're called to give up something. We have to leave that behind. So I will make of you a great nation and will bless you. In Babel, what do they try to do? They try to make a great name for themselves. But here God, this is where the great name comes from. It comes from God. God's going to give him, the people, a great name eventually. So that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. Now, Abraham at this time had no children. And his wife was, sterile. I mean, she couldn't conceive. And so he had no children, and God's saying he's going to make him a great nation. Well, that's a pretty tall order from a guy who's probably 80 or something. This whole thing happened about 4,000 years ago, just to kind of put in context. But he had no family. He had no offspring. And here God's going to tell him that there's going to be this great nation that he's going to make of him.
He was married to Ruth?
No, Sarah.
Oh, Sarah.
Yep. And there's a whole story behind it when God told him you're going to be a great nation, and then they got the slave girl Haggai, and they had a child with her, Ishmael, and that's all the Islamic, all the Arabs come from Ishmael. Every one of them traces back to Ishmael. And God said, you will be fighting against the Jews till the end of time. This was 4,000 years ago. He said this, and they are. He goes, Ishmael's going to be a wild ass of a man, and he's going to fight against your offspring forever. And here we are, 4,000 years later, and, the description is correct. So, I mean, we see that, but they are blessed, and they are actually, when you look at it compared to Christians, they are being fruitful and multiplying. They don't have, they're like the Catholics were 100 years ago. I mean, like in my family, we had 9 kids, right? Father John's family had 9 kids. His parents had 6 or 8 kids. I mean, all the Catholic families were big. And really, now it's like 1 or 2 kids. And that's why Christianity, if a whole generation has 1 kid, you're not going to have a lot of Christians after that, are you?
Well, you need 2 to break even.
Right, 2.1 actually for the population to keep increasing. And that's why there's a population cliff that happened in Japan. And in China, they have the same thing going on. It's a population cliff where the average age is, almost 60 in Japan now. The number of people, you know what I mean? So there's that's how tilted it's become. And so there's going to be, the population's going to rise, and then it's going to go up maybe to 10 or 11 billion, but then it's going to go down to 5. There's, kind of looking at it's going to reverse because there's so many people that aren't producing.
Yeah, they're easy.
So that's not following what God had told him to do. But the other thing I wanted to say here is Abram went as the Lord directed him. He didn't ask God, right? He didn't have like this big conversation, this big debate, like, okay, Lord, it's not recorded at least. God tells him to go, and he just moves, and it doesn't show any delay either. So we kind of really, it's easy to read this and kind of miss these important fine points, but, let's say God tells me, take your family and go, and I'll tell you where you're going to go, leave everything else behind. Even in this day and age where you have all the communication, the travel, everything else, that's a pretty big deal, right? Imagine it now 4,000 years ago where you're going out into the wild, literally.
Well, how did he tell him? Did he talk to him?
He talked to him, yeah.
Hey, you're going to bail. Yeah, God talked to you. You're going to listen.
Right. And even that, so, when you think about it, he said, you're going to be a great nation. He let him know. But after 20 years or 30 years or so with no children, that's when he had Hagar. He took things into his own hands, but he's like, God's not doing anything. It's been, a couple decades here. It's like, it's a long time to wait on God's promise. And I think we can learn from this because we want to have things done now, immediately. And we're going to look at this. In the Psalm, our soul waits for the Lord. There's an element of tension. It's called a stretched trust, where our trust is stretched, where we're really pulled apart on it. It's really being, we're like, okay, Lord, you said this was going to happen, but I don't know was that the Lord speaking to me, or was that just my imagination? That kind of, the human doubting, and of course you got Satan whispering in your ear like, well, was that really God, or was that, so we don't know. We question these things. Was that God's will? After 10 years goes by and you say, well, maybe I was wrong, or 20 years goes by, you really start thinking that. So, but Abram showed faith all throughout this time period. And he wasn't a perfect man, but he was perfect enough for God to use him. And I think that's pretty important too. So
Abram's dad was pagan, right?
Yeah.
So he didn't grow up in a strong.
Yep. Yeah. No. This was. But what's interesting is when Abram goes and the king of Salem shows up, Melchizedek, right? And he was a priest of God. And so what's amazing is that this character, and that's the priesthood of Jesus, is from this, it's beyond. So Abram pays him tithes too, 10%. And you would only do that to a greater person. But I think that's interesting is that there was at least one person, as part of the remnant that still worshiped God at that point in time. So that's just kind of a side note. But we'll get into the psalm now.